I mean, I guess it could be sheep shearing anywhere, but I love, if we could kind of zoom in here, when we look at this, the fact that everybody is sort of sitting there, obviously it's smile for the camera, to which some people are taking different ideas of what that means. We've got smile for the camera here. I'm not smiling for anybody. I'm just going to carry on sheep shearing. I'm really not bothered about any of it. Well, okay, I'll stand here if you want me to. Kid looking like he's having a bit more fun. He can't be doing with any of it. That there's that full kind of range that I think you get almost with any group that you attempt to photograph. So it's partially posed, though of course, it's also part documentary. This presumably was going on as an event. They didn't specifically grab a bunch of sheep shearers in order to take this photo. It would have already been an event, but they've all got to sort of stand and turn and look when they're told to, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. Part of what's fascinating about this is, clearly the presence of the photographer is part of the image.
Yes.
So, right, perhaps a welcome one, perhaps not. Clearly these folks have stopped in the middle of their, well, some of them have stopped in the middle of their work. Some have continued on. And one of the ways that you can tell that is that this isn't a split second exposure. I don't think it's terribly long. It might be a second or two. But there are some of these figures in motion, and you can see it from the blur.
Yes.
The figure actually right in the middle of the photograph, sitting behind the guy standing. He's clearly carried on working there. completely in spite of the photograph being made, and is just a blur. And what's interesting is, you're at this time, and if you zoom out again, there's another interesting aspect of it. Actually, right there is great. You can see that this was a glass plate negative by the cracks, the sort of V-shaped.
Okay. Yep, I'm with you. There
in the center,
lines coming down. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was printed despite the fact that the glass had been cracked at some point. So somebody, A, felt it was a valuable enough image, significant enough to go to the trouble to print, and B, you have to realize that this glass plate negative was printed onto the light sensitive albumen paper in sunlight. So it's contact printed. That's why you get that sharp detail on the cracks themselves, right, but also in the figures that have taken the trouble to stand still, to stop what they were doing and stand still for the photograph. And one thing to keep in mind at this time is that most professional photographers would have directed the scene so that every bit of it was as clear and sharp as possible. And because that was the expected aesthetic of such a photograph, because photographs could do that. It's one of the things photographs did best, was to capture that exquisite detail that our eyes see, but that's very, very difficult to capture in a painting. And by this point was in the mid 19th century, painting was becoming looser and looser in the way that painters, or many painters, applied the paint. Yeah. We're leading up to the period of, famously, the Impressionists, right? Yeah. Photography offered up something quite different. Photography offered up essentially, the things that we continued to expect from photography: that clarity, that veracity, right? That truthfulness, this is something that actually happened. It's something that took place in the world. There's a truthfulness to it, and an unmanipulated truthfulness. Well, we all know that wasn't necessarily true all the way back to the beginning, but it was expected. And I think even to this day, we have there's a certain part of us that kind of expects that out of photography, that it is distinguished in that way. It can capture something that actually did happen, even though we get photographs, very convincing photographs of things that never happened.
Yes, yeah, I think there's that the one of the phrases of photography we know more than any is the camera never lies. And yet I thought the camera never tells the truth. The camera is impossible of telling the truth. And yet we are caught up with this idea that we can't help but believe what we see. It just feels like we're seeing this with our own eyes. And we have to make a next step to start thinking about the fact that it could be deception or illusion or carefully crafted to manipulate our response. But yeah, I suppose something like this, very kind of staged documentary in a way. It is that bit where, okay, stop what you're doing, look at the camera, smile, say hello, whatever, hold it for 2 seconds, right? Thank you very much. We'll be on our way.